Thanks for coming. Like usual, I have lots of slides, so I'll just get started. I want to make a point. This is a totally different talk for me. You might recognize one or two slides, but I really feel that a huge transition has happened. There's a lot of people complaining now about people who crank out new ethical frameworks and this and that. We did stuff. We've actually done stuff. Look, 42 world governments have endorsed a set of principles I'm going to fit on this slide. This is great, right? And it's the OECD. The OECD is a think tank of, rich, basically, countries, right? That it came up with the data ethics that we use, which was actually pretty good for the last 40 years. So now they've done the same kind of thing with AI. They've gotten on top of it. They've got people to sign up to it. And there's 5 principles, all right? The first one is that AI should benefit people and the planet, right? Thinking about sustainability, as you've seen all over here. I know CogX and Tabitha are very into the sustainable goals. AI systems should be designed in a way that respects the rule of law, human rights, democratic values, and diversity. Look, and with appropriate safeguards, right? To ensure a fair and just society. The point here is we already have law, right? We've already figured out pretty well how to deal with each other. We all focus on the mistakes, but by and large, we've got 8 billion people fitting on one planet. It's impressive. AI is something we design, and so we can make sure that we fit it into the existing practices, right? We are engineering AI. All right. Third, there should be transparency and responsible disclosure, all right? That doesn't have to mean open source. It can mean that when something goes wrong, then maybe you let government regulators come and look and see if they can understand what went wrong, and you provide them the documentation, right? But there's transparency, responsible disclosure around AI systems to ensure that people understand when they, and now this is confusing, this is the people that are understanding when they engage with the AI systems. Sorry, the OECD is a lot of French people, so I think there was a little, but it's an important idea. AI systems must function in a robust, secure, and safe way throughout their lifetimes, all right? And potential risks should be continually assessed and managed. That means you don't just release it. Especially in the age of cybersecurity, the Internet of Things, we have to make sure that everything that we put out, that we maintain it. It has to do upgrades or it has to cut out, right? Or it shouldn't be on the Internet, right? And then finally, organizations and individuals developing, deploying, or operating AI systems should be held accountable for their proper functioning. So a lot of this has been about what the responsibilities are of us as developers, right, as organizations. But once you've sold it, and if you've sold it in good condition, then it becomes the province of the owner-operator. And again, the people who develop it need to make sure that they can help us hold accountable anyone who's misusing their software. But we hold accountable the users if the users are the problem, or the hackers if the hackers are the problem, right? Okay, so this is the OECD principles. But going back to this, what we do matters. Sometimes people say, what can we do, right? These are the UK principles of robotics, right? And they're incredibly similar. The only thing here is that the third one and the fourth one are flipped, right? But the first 3 were actually Asimov's laws fixed, right? It's not the robot that is saving the human's life. It's us that need to make sure that we save our own lives, right? And then the last 2 are about, as I said, the owner-operator responsibility, okay? But I'm not saying that nothing changed in the intervening 6 years. And we should, for those of us who are British, and despite my accent, we should be proud of the fact that we were the first country that had AI ethics soft law, right? That was the first national level soft law. But all the stuff in orange is improvements. It's on what was in that original system, right? So massive work has been done in the last 5 years. It does matter that all these other people have been chipping in, bringing their own stuff to the stage. And yeah, this is just two of the things. The IEEE initiative, huge, and obviously this thing is like 300 pages long. It's all the different kinds of things that you might want to think about if you're thinking about, having emotional AI or you're thinking about law. It's a set of challenges. It's still worth going and looking at that if you need to look at it. And similarly, the EU, I think they were a little cheesed off because their release was like 2 weeks before the OECD release, and they got trumped. But what they are doing is setting the law for the main body, the main transnational, international body that is actually helping us control what's happening at the transnational stage, right? It's a collection, a large collection of really affluent individuals, and when they do something like the GDPR, it matters. So all these things matter, and they all have been feeding into getting to the place we are now. But where are we now? I feel like we're in a situation where we can stop building new principle systems and really start moving forwards, okay? So I think we should consolidate some of the conclusions that have come out of those kinds of principles. I think we should be building infrastructure up so we can enforce those ideas. And I think, this is not really we need to stop anthropomorphizing AI, all right? And I'm concerned about this, not just because the people on the street still think robots need help or something, but more because a lot of the initiatives that were predating these more recent statements are using words that bother me. For example, responsible AI. AI is not responsible, right? Its makers, owners, and operators are. AI isn't itself accountable, right? And it's not going to explain itself. We have to explain what we're doing with those AI systems. That's what these rules were saying. Value alignment. There's a big discussion, mostly in the continental Europe, about making sure that the machines are value aligned. That doesn't mean that we have a robot that wants the same things that people want. It means that we are the operators, and the machine should express the operator's intentions, possibly with limits put on by the people who constructed it because they're worried about liability, right? But it's not about the machine itself. AI should be made transparent or explainable so that its makers can demonstrate due diligence and, where necessary, be held to account, right? It's the makers that are held to account. AI should promote accountability, right? So when diligent makers can improve it when mistakes are made. Oh, I see that. Oh yeah, somebody has switched my keynote into PowerPoint. Sorry, that was a beautiful build before. Oh well. And finally, AI should promote accountability, right? So sorry about that. That was something terrible with PowerPoint just happened. Sorry, annoyed. All right. So humans are of necessity responsible, okay? I'm just wondering what other builds are not going to work now. Oh well. Law and justice are more about dissuasion than recompense, right? It's not that people think sometimes that if they have law, then that means that if somebody did something wrong to them, they can get something back. But if you have someone you love that was killed, nothing will bring that person back, right? Law is about making sure that other people don't do that. And so it's not about revenge, it's about the future. It's about persuasion, all right? Software systems don't do that, okay? So safe, secure, accountable software systems are modular, suffering from isolation or loss and such as incoherent. No penalty of law against any artifact, including a shell company, can have efficacy. Humans are the accountable moral agents, right? We had a paper come out about this in 2017. This far, and then final thing I'll say about this is that if corporations are held to account, then they're going to want to create appropriate levels of transparency because they have to prove they did the due diligence. All right? So, where are we? The one thing I haven't talked about, and I'm going to keep talking. Where's my timekeeper? Somebody was going to keep time for me. Oh, well. Oh, there, yeah. So, am I halfway through now? Yeah, I'm about halfway through. Okay, good. Okay, so the second half of this now, I'm going to change streams and talk a little bit more about building infrastructure. And here's another really beautiful transition that presumably is not going to work because it's been switched into PowerPoint. But robots that proactively determine their own routes. Sorry about this. well, yeah, okay. All right. So a lot of stuff was lost here. Sorry. Anyway, the point of this was supposed to be that, that when people talk about autonomous systems, they usually talk about things like robots that can make their own choices, right? But that's not the best definition. Even humans don't get to choose exactly what they're going to do, right? Oh, who knows what just happened there? All right. Okay, so anyway, I'm just going to skip the slide. I'm sorry, always use your own laptop. It's such a disaster. I have no idea what's happening with the builds now. Okay. Right. So this is like completely screwed up. So yeah, you guys. All right, so ignore the bottom half of this, sorry. You weren't supposed to be able to see this at all. It says autonomy is the capacity for a geographic political region to control what happens within its borders. So I've obviously lost all my autonomy by not using my own laptop here, right? So this is the best definition of autonomy I've found ever, and I'm supposedly one of the experts in autonomy, right? It makes sense in the context of international relations because you can understand, now this is going to do something weird too. Oh, that was pretty much like it would have been in Keynote, okay. Right? So autonomy is never absolute. It doesn't make sense. You don't have humans that can do things without other humans. That never happens. It's always relative, right? So, right, and now this is when the build comes. So it's fundamentally entangled with the notion of security, right? So when you talk about war, it's when you assault your enemy's institutions, right? And that's when reducing autonomy. So that means that another country is stopping your country from being able to have as much influence as you would want within its borders. Is this making sense? I'm sorry that I'm freaked out about the slides being wrong. All right. So ICT compromises autonomy. I'm completely terrified now about what builds are going to work in that. All right. So we can recognize how people will vote from Facebook likes, right? There was a paper that came out in like 2014 telling us that you only needed about 50 Facebook likes to better predict how someone is going to vote than their own partner can, right? Also, the Connect. Now, this hasn't been talked about as much, but Microsoft itself put out papers in 2014, 2015. I think the papers came out in 2015, but they were showing them in conferences in 2014, showing that just by the way, having this thing sitting on your television set, watching you watch the commercials, the advertisements, meant that you could predict how people were responding to the ads and whether they're going to get engaged and go out. You can also predict things like divorce, all right? We can easily recognize personality, which is what the Facebook likes thing was about, right? From things like not only likes, but also Twitter, right? When you have people's texts, you can get enough information. And then we can encourage action by individuals with targeted beliefs. So this is what Chris Wiley has been alleging was actually originally constructed in order to help try to dismantle terrorism. They would find people that had beliefs that were obscure in their own little region, but that were the ones that, say, the British government wanted them to have. And then they would go and get all those people who thought that way together in one coffee house. And when they found a whole lot of other people that thought the same way, they would feel empowered, and they'd say, this is great. You know, and they would go forward and actually take action. We thought that was great when it was other people's countries, right? And that's why Chris Wiley became a whistleblower. But I don't even want to just focus on this. People argue about can AI have had that much impact on the elections? And there's more detail than I probably have time for at this point. But look at the Brazilian elections. This is an amazing article. It's about weaponizing WhatsApp, which was supposedly not even a broadcast thing, but you can turn it into a broadcast thing by either having sock puppets or actually AI bots to propagate information from one group to the next, right? It's just incredible. Every single group that was at all accessible, even the ones that were for the opposition, but also like gardening groups and everything, were all talking about the guy who won the most recent Brazilian election, right? All right, so yeah, money compromises autonomy, which was a big concern of Americans' founding fathers. Sorry, a little pitch for the musical here. Right? Which is, you know, one of the things that can maybe help us finally understand what happened with World War I a century later, right? That was the last time we had inequality at the same levels as we have it now. And when I was growing up in the 70s, the history books were saying, nobody really knows what happened with World War I, right? But when you have escalating inequality, then smaller and smaller numbers of people have more and more power, and that again reduces autonomy because individuals can have more influence than nations, right? So we don't know exactly what caused the inequality, but I'm working now with this guy, Nolan McCarty. He's one of the global experts in inequality and political polarization. We're thinking that when technology reduces the cost of distance, then naturally, not by cheating, just naturally, fewer people have more money because they have a larger area that they can sell to, right? So in the late 19th century, that was stuff like oil, telegraph, rail, that meant that you could get your products out further. Now it's ICT, right? Now the Google is like Boeing. They can get their product anywhere, not free. It's incredible infrastructure, right? So the problem, once you get inequality, even if it was from completely legitimate means, is something called regulatory capture, and that leads to these spiraling events. But I want to point out there was some people going around saying, oh, what happened in 1978, this incredible, great decoupling of wages from productivity. But if you look at with a little bit longer framework, you realize that there was actually a great coupling. This was a decision that after one World War and one financial crash, the proletariat and a few of the elite got together. This is American data. And they actually said, okay, we're going to reduce political polarization, we're going to reduce inequality, and they stabilized things for a while. All right? Now, I'm thinking I'm burning through time, but if you could ask this in Q&A if you want more about that. Some people think now that we ICT, geography doesn't matter anymore, all right? But it matters. It matters whether your neighbor's house burns down, whether their kids have vaccinations, air pollution is killing lots of people in the world, right? Water supplies, all these things matter with space. And so does international security, all right? At a different scale. Our problems in Britain are not the same as the problems of Switzerland, or as the problem of the Netherlands, or as the problems of Korea, right? Because your neighbors matter, and your geography matters, right? The interesting thing is that the EU's GDPR is identifying personal information as part of a person, which makes sense because of that stuff I was saying about being able to influence people. It's like you're nudging, right? It's like physical nudging. So defending citizens' persons is the duty of the nation state, okay? National governments or other geographic executive authority are going to, though, have to adapt. Because of the differences with ICT and the transnational companies, we expect that governments won't have the same kinds of influence that they had before. Trains as well as strange slides, okay. Right, so we do need to expect that things are going to go somewhat differently. And then finally, what things that we are going to have to do. So the governments are going to have to change, but so are the rest of us. In tech, we need to adapt by paying enough tax to allow people to set up the infrastructure we need to keep our society stable, right? So we've got to pay tax, and we also have to expect that people are going to figure out how to license us and to inspect our products, right? That already happens with buildings, it happens with cars, it happens with planes, and it happens with iStore, right? Apple already does this. It's not something that's confusing to us. It also happens with our software when it's in cars and planes. So don't act like we can't possibly function this way. We can. Okay. So, whoops, oh, that was my person was over there that I was supposed to be talking to. Right, so I'm going to skip over the data thing. But I will talk about regulating humans here. And again, you should recognize this stuff. It's DevOps. Okay. Right? So the questions for governments are, was the law or a treaty deliberately violated, right? A special case, are we under persistent attack? Were citizens or visitors harmed, right? Had something fundamental changed in the world that requires a new resource to help citizens flourish? Because that's what governments do. They take resources and they apply them to problems. That's how we solve problems with governments, right? It's something we do. So the answers are, we need to be able to present information, that was that DevOps slide, set up the logs so governments can tell whether or not something bad has happened. And that same mechanism allows us to tell if it was done accidentally. The penalties should be different, if it was deliberate or accidental, right? But humans are the ones that build AI, and we're the ones that have to be regulated. Has something fundamentally changed? Yes. Not only do we have to just follow good DevOps and keep our logs around and things like that, but also the government is going to have to set up regulatory bodies. And again, the UN has already agreed to this. Not the UN, sorry, not the UN. The EU has already made this a requirement that every EU country should have a regulatory body in it. And then finally, transnational cooperation is needed for transnational redistribution. All right? So thank you for your attention, and I want to encourage you, if you want to see my slides actually in Keynote, you should come to University of Bath. We have a PhD, and if you already have PhDs, this is funded for 5 years by the British government. We are, as far as I know, the only ethics-oriented doctoral training center, but also we have all this resource to help you. So if you are an NGO or a company or a government organization or any of these things, come to us, and we are happy to help steer our PhD students to solving your problem. Okay, thank you.